Yeah. Okay, cool. So it looks like we're live here. What's up, everybody? I got Scott Deluzio here. He's an Army veteran. Gonna be doing my podcast episode with him. As always, going live in the group for you guys to check it out live or watch it after the fact. Again, if you're watching it after the fact, hashtag live in the comment box. Or I'm sorry, if you're watching it live, hashtag live in the comment. If you're watching it after the fact, hashtag replay in the comment. And as always, we're here to answer any questions that you guys have. So if you have any questions on Scott's story, if you have any fitness related questions for me, drop them in the chat. We'll be sure to answer them after. And yeah, let's get going. All right. So get the podcast going. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fit Veteran Podcast. I'm Matt Priest, your host, and I have Scott Deluzio with me. Scott is an Army veteran. He's written his own book called Surviving Son, where he talks about his story in Afghanistan, him losing a brother in Afghanistan, like an actual brother, like a blood brother, not just like, we all call each other brother, sisters in the military. And he's the host of his own podcast called the Driven Podcast. So where he talks about he shares inspirational stories about veterans. So welcome, Scott. Glad to have you. I'm excited about this one.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here and glad to be live on Facebook with your group here, and here to share my story.
Awesome, cool, man. So let's just get right into it, man. So I kind of want to go into like the whole being deployed with your brother. So the first thing it reminds me of, I'm sure you probably heard of, is like the Saving Private Ryan story.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen Private Ryan, definitely check it out. But it's essentially they're going to find a military member that's fighting in a war and letting him know that, hey, your brother was killed in service, and you basically have to go home, because at that time they couldn't have, there's only they had to have at least one surviving member of the family to kind of carry on the name. Now, is that still true today, or like how does that exactly work, Scott?
Yeah, so in a way, it's similar to the movie in that sense. Obviously, with communication the way it is these days, much faster to get the word out to me out in the field
Right.
versus having to send a whole squad of soldiers out to go try to find me, not knowing where I was or anything like that. As far as that goes, none of that happened. It was more like radio communications and things like that, which was a heck of a lot better than World War II era radio communication. Not much better, but better. So as far as that goes, they did send me home pretty much right away after my brother was killed. So the day that he was killed, I found out about it short time afterwards. And they got me on a flight like the next morning out of Afghanistan. I was actually on the same flight that my brother was on. They had the whole ramp ceremony where they basically bring the bodies of the fallen soldiers onto the plane, and they have a whole kind of ceremony. I kind of equate it to like a wake, like if you ever been to a funeral or a wake or something like that. It's very similar to that, where people come pay their respects and all that kind of stuff, which was kind of interesting. I've never been a part of that, so it was kind of nice that I was able to be there for that. Given the circumstances, none of it was nice, but
Right.
it was what it was, right?
Right.
And so I was on the plane out of there. We went to Kuwait, then Germany, and then I was home. So that was all relatively quick. Within less than 48 hours, I was home of finding out that my brother was killed. Now the orders that I had was for 2 weeks, to be home for 2 weeks, and then I'd be going back to Afghanistan.
Mhm.
And uh, while I was home, actually at my brother's funeral, um, so I was in the National Guard, and so
Mhm.
for people who aren't familiar with the National Guard, not only is the president like the commander in chief, but also the governor of whatever state you are. They're also kind of in a way the commander in chief as well. And so the governor came to my brother's funeral, and she basically said, like, no, you're not going back overseas. I'm ordering you to stay home. And so, like, at that point, I was like, okay, well, like, all my guys are back there. Like, what the hell? Like, it was kind
Right.
of this weird place. Like, yeah, I wanted to be home because I was sad, I was grieving, and I wanted to be with family, but also I had all my guys back overseas, and so that was there's like a little bit of a conflict there for me, like staying versus going, and at that point I was being ordered to stay, so I didn't have much choice in the matter, but it was
Mhm.
just that inner conflict with me. So it was a little bit different than what the movie portrayed, but there's some similarities, I would say.
Yeah, okay. And so was it just you and your brother as far as kids of your parents, or what, did you have other
Yeah,
siblings? So, okay. So they didn't have any rules in like modern times set up about like, hey, if somebody in your family dies and you're the last one left, like you gotta stick around. They're about ready to send you back then.
right, exactly. Yeah, so um there's no rule that they have to keep you out. um but there was an army regulation. I don't know if it's changed or not since the time, because this is 13 years ago now. But I imagine it's probably the same anyways. But it was called surviving sons and daughters, where if a a brother, in my case, if there's someone who passed away, an immediate family member passed away while serving, the remaining surviving sons, daughters, whatever, would be able to request an early discharge. And the reason why I titled my book Surviving Son is because that's actually what I used to get discharge out of the military. It was about, I had about 6 months left in my contract. I had screwed up my knee when I was in Afghanistan, and I had surgery when I got home, and I was going to be basically out of commission, not really able to do any training or anything like that for the remainder of my time in the service. So I just said, you know what, like, what am I doing? I'm coming into training, and I'm just sitting there with a bum leg, watching everybody else go off and do stuff, and I'm just sitting there doing nothing. Um,
Right.
and so I was like, that was more depressing to me than it was worth. And I was like, uh, I might as well just get out now, because I'm actually not doing anything for the next 6 to 9 months or so, while I was going through rehab. And so I was like, you know what, let's just you know let's just call it here. And so I requested that discharge, and within a couple weeks it was approved, and I got out at that point. So
Okay. Now, did that mess up your honorable discharge? Like, obviously, you're still honorable discharge, but is it like under medical conditions or anything like that?
no, it was an honorable discharge, just like anyone else's. There's
Okay.
no, asterisks or qualification to that. It was just an honorable discharge.
Okay.
It because the way the regulation is written is, like, there's various ways that people can get discharged. There's medical discharges, there's a dishonorable discharge, and there's all these
Right.
other kind of conditions. This is just one of those things where this is a reason for someone to be discharged. You could also be
Mhm.
discharged when your contract's up and you're done.
Right.
It's really the same idea. It's just kind of accelerating that time frame.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted, I was like, man, I hope that didn't like put it, like you said, any asterisks on what you actually did, because I mean, you're well deserving of everything. So,
Sure.
tell me about your brother. Like, was he older, younger, and like, did you guys enlist around the same time? Like, could you give me a backstory on that a little bit?
Yeah. So he was actually my younger brother, and he enlisted first, before I did, which is kind of a little bit backwards way most people do. It's usually like the young guys follow in the older guys' footsteps, but
Mhm.
in this case, I was following in his footsteps. And basically after 9/11 happened, I was in college when 9/11 happened, but after that, I kind of had this little bug inside of me. It was like, I want to serve in some capacity. I didn't know if it was, in the military, or I don't know what it was that I wanted to do, but I kind of always had a little bit of a heart for the military. And then my brother went and joined, and I all of a sudden went from being the big brother who he looked up to now I was looking up to him. Like I felt like he was a superhero kind of guy now, like after volunteering to enlist. And so about a year after he joined, I was already out of college at this point, but a year after he joined, I started hearing these reports in the news that that the military was struggling to meet their recruiting numbers and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, where the hell are all the people from, back around 9/11, when everyone wanted to join and go, kick some ass and, whatever. Where did all these
Mhm.
people go? And I realized I was one of those people, and I still haven't done anything about it, and
Mhm.
so I said, okay, well, I'm still young enough. I'm fit, maybe not as fit as I should be, but I was capable of joining the military. So why not me? And so at that point, my mind was basically made up. I was gonna join. So I called up my brother first, and I said, hey, I'm gonna join too. I'm gonna follow in your footsteps here. And I said, but talk me out of it. Tell me all the negatives, all the downsides, and all that kind of stuff that maybe I'm not thinking of certain things. And he failed at talking me out of it. He he tried to give me, obviously, you can get hurt, you can get killed, all these things. It's like I knew that. So like he wasn't gonna talk me out of it. I just wanted to do my due diligence or whatever and see if he could talk me out of it. But really there was no talking me out of it. So so the next week I went down to the recruiter's office, signed the paperwork, and that was it. But he and I were really close. We After I graduated college, got out of basic training, and he had been in Iraq while I was in basic training. He and I moved into a condo together. We lived together, even though
So
we
what was
grew
that?
up together. But
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What was the age difference then? You might have said it already.
yeah, no, I didn't. 3 years.
3.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. So you
yeah,
guys are pretty tight
pretty
then.
close.
That's
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah. So we were really close. We did all sorts of things together and everything, and so we just it was just a natural fit, for us to live together and all that kind of stuff. And he ended up moving out after I got married, but the two of us still we went and did things together, whatever, little brothers and big brother, tend to do. We went off and watch sports, went to the bar, had a drink or whatever. We just kind of hung out together, and it was just a good fit, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you guys were in Afghanistan, were you in the same unit? Was it completely separate units? You just ended up both being there at the same time coincidentally, or like how did that work?
Yeah, so when we joined, so he joined in the Vermont Army National Guard, and I joined in the Connecticut Army National Guard. And when we first joined, the two units that we joined there was no relationship between the two of them. But at some point while we were in, there was some reorganization that took place, and the two units ended up going under the same brigade.
Hmm.
And so this deployment was a brigade wide deployment. So I think it was one of the biggest deployments of National Guard soldiers since World War II. When we were deployed, there were somewhere around 5,000 or so soldiers between everybody that ended up going over to Afghanistan, and so he was in a different location because he was with a different unit. So when we were over there, I never saw him at all. Actually, I never spoke with him at all. Just communications over there is not the best. Um, but most of the communication that I had with him was like the telephone game. Like I would call home to my parents, and he would call home to the parents, and we would just kind of get filled in from whatever each other told our parents. And who knows how much of the message was accurate, but it was as good as it could get. So yeah, we did that. Uh we weren't together, but we were able to kind of keep each other posted on what was going on just by communicating through folks at home.
Yeah, I'm assuming that was pretty nerve-wracking for your parents to have both their only sons
Yeah.
in war at the same time. Like what was their feelings on the whole situation? Obviously, they didn't have any control over it, but what was their feelings on it?
They were, it's hard to tell exactly what they're feeling in the moment, but I talked to them afterwards, years later, And they were like, you know what, we were proud of you guys because you guys uh, volunteered to go serve in a time of war. You knew you're most likely going to get deployed, especially both of us being infantrymen. We like that's what you do. You go to war and you go and fight. Like that's your job. And so they're like, you know, we're proud of you for doing that. They're scared as hell for us, but um, you know, they also were extremely proud that we decided to you know, stand up and serve our country. And so you know, that I don't know if that was an overriding thing, you know, when we were deployed, because, you know, still both of your sons are in a combat zone, and that's got to be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and you're both combative too. It's not like you're in the rear with the gear, like, you
Right.
know, inside the wire. Like you guys are out there getting it every day. So with that being said, was that he went in first? Was that what he wanted to do? And then did you end up doing that because, hey, I'm not gonna let my little brother like one up me, you know, and I'm gonna be like the admin guy, you know? So like tell me about that.
That was exactly it. That was the probably word for word the thought that went through my mind. You know, I he joined because he had talked to a guy who he was going to school with, who was in the National Guard, and he talked up the infantry because that's what he did. And he's like, yeah, you want to do this job because this is better. You know, the whole, you know, grunt versus pogue thing and all that. You know, he
Hmm.
went through that whole thing, and so then my brother, he goes through basic training, he gets deployed, all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna go and be, you know, like a finance clerk or something. Not you know, knocking those guys at all, because we obviously need those guys too, and everything. But I was like, he's gonna go, you know, kicking indoors, and I'm gonna go get paper cuts. It's like, I don't know, I can't handle that. So
Yeah, can't let that happen. That's
so
awesome. So tell me if you don't mind, and if you do, like it's perfectly fine, but tell me about like, you know, the day that it happened, like exactly what were you doing? What
sure.
was he doing? And also if you could, you might have mentioned it, I might have missed it. What year was this again?
Yeah, this was 2010 when this happened. Um,
2010.
and so the day that he was killed, I was out on a mission, and I had been basically out of touch with anybody back home for a couple weeks because we were we moved out to like a remote base, very limited communications there, and the missions that we were doing every couple days, we'd get on helicopters and we'd fly out at night to some remote village, and we were doing like a joint operation with the Afghan army and the American soldiers, and we would fly out to these villages, wait for first daylight to break, and go kind of raid through the village looking for Taliban like weapons and people. And they apparently stole some Afghan army uniforms, and so we go through those villages looking for all that kind of stuff, anything that might indicate that there were Taliban people there. And so that day we were in one of these villages doing the normal operation that we had been doing the last couple weeks, and uh, I got a call on the radio saying that our commanding officer was looking for me. And I was a sergeant, so it wasn't like I was super high ranking. And usually, when the commanding officer jumps the chain of command like that, you either did something really good or really bad. And I was like, shit, I didn't do anything really good today. Like, I just did my job like normal, like nothing special. Nothing, I'm not getting any medals for anything today. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, what did I screw up? What happened? And so I'm checking all my guys' equipment. I'm checking everything, make sure nobody lost anything. I couldn't figure it out. And so I'm like, all right, well, now what? Like, I got to go find the commanding officer and go check in with him. And so I finally get up to where he was, and he told me to take my helmet off and take a knee. And I was like, what the hell? Like, you don't tell people to take your helmet off outside the wire like that. Like that, they just don't
Yeah.
do that. And so I'm like, okay,
Right.
something's seriously screwed up here. What's going on? So I went over, took a knee, and he told me that my brother, his unit was, you know, got ambushed. They're out on a mission. They got ambushed, and he got hit. And initially, to me, I was like, okay, he got hit, so he's probably hurt. All right, cool. Where is he? You know, can I get to him? Can I be with him for, you know, moral support, or, you know, maybe he needs, you know, blood or something, or an organ. I don't know what he needs. Like, if I can be there and I can help him out, like, let's figure out the logistics, get me there so I can so I can help him out however I can. And a commanding officer looked at me like I had three eyes or something. He's like, no, man, you don't understand. He's been killed. And
Mm.
like right then and there, it was like a punch in the gut. Like the air just got sucked out of me. Um, like, and I instantly just started like playing this future tape of life without him. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, he's been around for almost my entire life. I can't vision life without him in it. It was just such a hard thing to get through. And so, like anybody else, I was a complete mess. I was in tears. I was, not in a good place. Um, my commanding officer asked me if I was going to hurt myself or anybody else or anything. Obviously I got a loaded rifle with me. Obviously, if I wanted to hurt somebody, I could, including
Right.
myself. Um, but at the time I was like, how the hell could I hurt myself at a time like this? Like, my parents just lost a kid. How can I make them lose two in the same
Right.
day? Like, that would be screwed up. Um, so anyways, I kind of just like dealt with everything at that point. About 15 or 20 minutes or so after finding out my brother was killed, um, our own unit started taking fire from the village that we just came out of. And
Jesus.
so not only was I dealing with the grief and the sadness of losing my brother, I had to shove all that down and now go get back in the fight, because it's
Mm.
not like there's a timeout corner where you can just go and like, oh, here's my safe space, and just
Yeah,
go hang
for
out, right? The
God, that's
Taliban doesn't
insane.
care. So
Right. God,
so
man.
I literally just shoved all the crappy emotions down, and just I had to go lead my soldiers. I had to go make sure that they were taken care of and that none of them were going to get injured or killed either, because how could I look their families in the face and be like, hey, I was having a bad day, so that's why you lost your loved one. So I had to shove all that stuff down and deal with it, so
What
that
was what was the mindset? Obviously, like you said, you shoved it down. Was it like, now I'm extra pissed off, want to kill these guys, or was it like, this fucking sucks, I just got to get through this part so I can kind of get my bearings collected again? Or like, where were you at that point?
yeah, it was complete rage.
Was it
It
okay?
was anger. If I had the ability to, I would have killed everybody in the country. Every Afghan person, I would have killed them all. I would have
Dang.
gone back down into the village, man, woman, child, doesn't matter. I would have killed everybody, because I was just that angry. Um, I actually had that thought in my head. I was like, I'm just gonna go do it. I'm just gonna go kill people, because that's just where my head was at. Um, then again, that thought that I had, I was like, if I go do that, the likelihood of me surviving that is slim to none. And then my parents are going to get a second knock on the door. Like, I can't do that to them.
Right. Right.
I had a wife at home. I had a newborn son. He was about 9 months old at the time. Like, I can't make it so that he grows up without a father because I lost my cool and I went and did something stupid like that. So as
Mm.
much as I wanted to, I also was like, you know what, there's other stuff that I have to take care of too. I can't just let the emotions get the better of me. um I would have, in that moment, I would have loved to, although looking back on it now, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I did something like that too.
No, that's great that you had that like, you had that mentality still, like after everything was going on, you still were thinking of others. I think that's, the 22 veterans that commit suicide, I don't think, and granted, everybody's going through their own thing, but they're not
Yeah,
thinking of a lot of other people. They're thinking about how much it sucks right now for themselves.
right.
So good for you to like actually, you have a kid, you had your parents that, they're gonna find out soon enough. They don't have one son's gone, so they don't want to hear two sons are gone.
Yeah,
So that's amazing, man. I appreciate you sharing that, because I know that's probably still not even easy nowadays, still sharing that. It really wasn't that long ago, like 13 years now, right?
right. Yeah. No, and you know what, you're right. It's never easy to share, but I do share it because uh there may be somebody who might be listening to this who it might help, or it might even just shed some light on, like, what do service members actually have to deal with in real life. And this is my story. This is, not everybody has to deal with this kind of stuff, but I did. And there's some others that might have to deal with stuff like this too. um and it sucks, but we do it.
Yeah. So can you tell me about like what that grieving process was like when you finally were able to like okay, I'm not getting shot at anymore. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, not only that, like right after, but like when you got home and you're like, obviously you want to, and I know that happens a lot with veterans where it's like we have that extreme guilt of like, well, somebody else got killed. It wasn't me. Like, or hey, I need to go join the fight again.
Yeah.
Can you like walk us through like that process?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, after that firefight, I was still on the adrenaline high of, all of that stuff. And so I never really took that grief back out of wherever I stuffed it down into, and I never really dealt with it in a great way. Um, when I when they flew me off the mountaintop, the rest of the unit was still staying there, and they flew me out to kind of get me home, or at least on my way home. And so I met with some of the leadership from our brigade, and I said, I want to escort him all the way home. And they're like, well, no, you can't do that. We can let you escort him out of Afghanistan, but to go to Kuwait, but that's about as far as you can go with him. Then you're going to go, straight home. And that was such a tough pill to swallow for me, because it's like, you never leave a fallen soldier. And I was like, well, not only is it a fallen soldier, it's my brother who was killed, and I can't leave him. But they're like, you know what, you're worth more to your family at home, being there with them, letting them get the peace of mind knowing that you're home and safe, and you're not, in any kind of dangerous situation. My mind wasn't there thinking of that kind of stuff, but that's ultimately that's what ended up happening. But I wanted desperately to kind of just follow him the whole way home and just escort him the whole way, but that didn't work out that way. But when I got home, um, unlike a lot of people who maybe have lost a loved one, um, it was blasted all over the news in our
Mm.
local community. All the local television stations, newspapers, radio stations, all those reporters, they were lining my parents' street, going up to their house, all the news vans and all that kind of stuff, the day that I was coming home from the airport. And at first, I was like, screw those people. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want anything to do with them. They're just out here to, like vultures looking for, a little piece of something to grab for their story or whatever. They're just here for themselves. But then I think it was one of the casualty assistance officers, or maybe a public affair officer. He said, "Look, they're going to run a story one way or the other. You might as well give them my brother's story, and from the people who actually knew him. Otherwise they're going to go to grocery store parking lot and just ask random people for some 20-second sound bites or whatever, and it's going to be generic and it's going to be forgotten." And so I was like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do every interview for anybody who asks. I'm there. I'm doing it. And so we did, weeks and months later, years later, when I'm still doing an interview today, and so like that was a mindset. It's like anyone who's willing to give us a platform to speak about it, we're doing it. Um, and so with that, it also became like a new mission for me. That mission was do this for him, so his memory doesn't die, it stays alive, and as long as that memory is still alive, then he's still alive. It was kind of the mindset that I had. And so I was focused so much on that mission, I didn't really focus on my own grief or mental health or anything like that. I was just, that's it, I'm doing that, and I'm gonna just keep on doing that, and there's no stopping me at that point. um when a few months later, after coming back home, I realized I was not myself. I was drinking too much. I was
Mm.
not sleeping well at all. And so I found myself drinking to the point where I'd just pass out, and like that's how I would get to sleep, which is totally crappy sleep. I wake up in the morning groggy, hungover, pissed off at the world. Um, have a ton of coffee and energy drinks and all this other stuff to wake myself back up, so I can actually go to work and function as a functioning human. Um, and that would be something I'd continue to do throughout the day. I keep drinking caffeine all throughout the day, which affected my sleep. So it made me want to drink more. And it just became this vicious cycle. And it was awful. It was just a terrible cycle. And I was becoming such a miserable person to be around. I was angry all the time. My son, who was, like an infant at the time, I was I was like yelling at little things that he'd do, like he'd spill food off his, high chair, onto the floor or whatever. I'd start yelling and screaming, and the dog would do stuff, and I'd yell at the dog, and like I was a jerk at that point. I had this moment where I was like, who is this person? Who have I become? I used to be like a happy person. Like nothing pissed me off. Like you could punch me in the face, I'd be like, oh, that kind of hurt. Don't do that. Like it wasn't like I was just a totally 180 different person. Like it wasn't even remotely close to the type of person I used to be. So I was like, I gotta go get some help. Like I can't keep going in this direction because my wife's not going to put up with it too much longer. My kid deserves better than that, and it's like everybody around me is suffering because I'm not taking care of it, because I never picked that grief back up. And so I finally had to do something with it. And so I did. I went and talked to somebody, and got some help because I clearly wasn't doing a good job on my own.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I definitely want to touch on exactly what you did. And I do want to tie that into fitness because I know you do work out and you talk about it on your podcast and like the mental clarity it gives you and all of that.
Yeah.
So but going back to like talking about how the news outlets and everybody was there, that's the first thing I thought of when I seen your stories. Like, damn, this would be like a crazy movie, So I don't know. Like, obviously, you got the book, but man, Hollywood or somebody needs to like Netflix needs to get a hold of that script if you're willing to, because I feel like that'd be intense.
Listen, if there's anyone from like Netflix or whatever out there that can hook me up with something like that, I absolutely would want to put this into some sort of movie or something like that.
That'd be awesome, man. So with that being said, let's dive into the book a little bit. So
Sure.
obviously, it's about your story. What kind of prompted you to like? Because I feel like a lot of people, especially veterans, are gonna be like, "Man, I ain't trying to talk about that." And I know you said it became your mission to make his story keep him alive basically through his
Yeah.
story. But what other things do you kind of dive into with the book?
The book basically is kind of like a story of our lives. It starts off, just talks about who we were as kids. We grew up in in the suburbs, typical suburban type family. We had very patriotic upbringing. We looked at, the basically anyone who puts on a uniform and puts their life on the line. We looked at those people as like the superheroes. It wasn't like, the Michael Jordans or anyone like that who was like the superheroes in our family. It was the people who put those uniforms on. And so when my brother eventually joined before me, like I said earlier, like he was a superhero. Like that was not an exaggeration. Like I looked at him as like this superhuman kind of person now because he was in that category. Um, and so the book talks about kind of our upbringing and what got us to where we were as far as joining the military and all that kind of stuff. And it talks a lot about the stuff that we talked about already. The time in Afghanistan and the stuff that he and I both did while we were over there. Um, but I think importantly, the stuff that it talks about is the aftermath of dealing with this stuff, because I certainly made a lot of mistakes when I was trying to cope with this. The coping was a joke. What I was doing was not helping anything. Um, I told you earlier I had messed up my knee when I was in Afghanistan. When I came back home, I used that as an excuse to stop working out, and so I gained a bunch of weight. Wasn't the good kind of weight. It wasn't like muscle mass or anything like that. It was I got fat. I was drinking too much. Eating crappy food. I was not doing anything good for my health, physical or mental. And there was actually one day I went into to training. I was in on crutches and I'm hobbling around, and my platoon sergeant looked at me. He goes, "Have you been hitting the gym? Because you look like you kind of beefed up a little bit." I was like, "Oh yeah, that must have been it." But under the uniform, it was kind of hard to tell exactly what it was. But no, I was like, "No, I'm
Right,
getting fat, man. Like it's
right,
just
yeah,
nothing good going on here." Um, and so that had a negative effect on my mental health too, because I was just sitting around, feeling sorry for myself, not doing anything, you know, to exert any sort of physical energy. And so like that kind of blew things up too. And so, in the book, I talk about all these things. I talk about how the, um, you know, lack of uh, coping skills or whatever that I had, kind of just negatively affected everything in my life. It affected my job, it affected relationships, it affected, everything. My physical health, my mental health. I mean, we were just going. I was going down a wrong path there, and so I talk about that in the book because there's so many other people who have suffered in one way or another. They've had a loss of somebody, or they experienced some traumas, or whatever it was that they experienced in their life. Um, and they may be dealing with it in a very similar way to what I was doing. They may be having a completely different circumstance. It might not have been their sibling who died or whatever, but the way you deal with it is kind of the important part. And so I made so many mistakes. I wanted to write about them all and be like, hey, I did this. Don't do that because this is stupid. This is why. It causes all these other problems. And hopefully someone who reads it will look at that and maybe have like this revelation to themselves and be like, yeah, that sounds like me. Oh, maybe this is why everything's all screwed up in my life. Like maybe that'll help. I don't know. And if it does, I'm glad. I'm glad that my suffering and the pain that I went through and the pain that I put my family through was for something. That it helped somebody somewhere along the way. I would never want to put them through anything like that again, but um, you know, I already did. So at least let's get something good out of it.
For sure, man, for sure. And yeah, a lot of people need that because you're 100% right. Like a lot of people just don't understand how to deal with the traumas they've gone through, so they go to the easy things like you talked about, like the controlled substances and all of that. So was there like an exact turning point that you can remember where you just were kind of like at your rock bottom? You're like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, there was. And so tell us about that, and then tell us about like what were the exact first steps you did to kind of like get yourself out of that.
Yeah. So, I mentioned earlier, I was angry. I was yelling at everybody, screaming. I was just a miserable person, right? My dog at the time came into our bedroom, my wife and my bedroom, and for whatever reason, our house, we had white carpets in the bedroom. It was a stupid choice, I know, but whatever. It was what it was. So, and then right off the bedroom, there was a bathroom, and the bathroom had all tile floor, and the flooring actually makes a difference in just a second here. So the dog was sick and went to go throw up, and she was standing right at the edge of the bathroom and the bedroom, and threw up right on the carpet. Where like 2 inches this way, she would have been on the tile, nice and easy to clean up. Where she was, now I got to go get a steam cleaner, and otherwise the carpet's ruined, it's stained, and all that kind of stuff. And I flipped out like it wasn't me. Like it was like a almost like a out of body experience. Like it was somebody else was in control of whatever the hell I was doing at that point. But I'm screaming at the dog. I'm just a mess. I'm going off on this dog. And then I had a moment of clarity, and I was like, the dog's sick. First off, me yelling at her is not making her feel any better. Um,
Mhm.
Second off, she doesn't understand a word I'm saying. She knows I'm pissed, but she doesn't understand a word I'm saying. So I'm wasting my breath. Like, this is stupid. What are you doing? And I just sat down and I'm like, I don't recognize myself anymore at this point. And this dog was like a gift from God or something, because I sat down on the floor, and despite the fact that she's sick and she's throwing up and all this other stuff, she came over and just like sat down next to me and just kind
Mhm.
of like put her head down on me, like to like kind of comfort me. And it's like, you're the one who's sick. But I think she realized that I was sick too, just a different kind of sick.
Right.
Um, and she came over and she was like, you're there to comfort me. I was like, I don't deserve this. But what I do need to do is I need to do better for not only for this dog, for my wife, for my kids, for everybody in my life. I need to do better. And so the next morning, this was already later at night. So the next morning, I picked up the phone, I called the vet center, um, and made an appointment for counseling. And within a couple days, they had an appointment for me to come in, and um, I got to tell you, it was the scariest phone call I think I've ever made, because I had no idea what to expect when
Mhm.
I made that phone call. Or even what the appointment would be like. I didn't know what I was signing myself up for. I don't know if it was, padded rooms and, a straight jacket, or anything. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, um, but I called, and the people on the other end were the nicest people ever. Like, a lot of times government employees get a bad rap, but like these were like the absolute nicest people. They were kind, they're helpful. They kind of walked me through like what I needed to do. Um, when I got to the first appointment, my heart was probably pounding outside of my chest, because I didn't know. Again, I still had no idea what to expect. Um, but I walked into the room. The guy who was the counselor, he was also an Army veteran, combat veteran. Um, he kind of got it. Like, he understood. He hadn't gone through the same exact thing that I went through, but he's been in combat, and he knew what types of stuff that I experienced, and all that. And so we just talked. It was just two guys talking in, a private room. There's nobody else listening in, or eavesdropping or anything like that. And as I'm talking, like, it just started to feel like a little bit better. Like, I was unpacking some of that stuff that I shoved down. I was getting some of it
Mhm.
out. And yeah, I cried sometimes. And yeah, I, got angry sometimes, and stuff came out, but it was a comfortable place that I was able to just talk about it and let my emotions out, and be able to kind of deal with some of that stuff. Um, Honestly, had I not gone there, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know, like, how far down I would have ended up going before I was like, okay, this is too much. Or, would I ever have caught myself? Would I continue to have spiraled out of control, and, gone to extreme lengths of, you know, drugs and other stuff like that? And who knows where I would have ended up being. Um, but going to those sessions, really helped me to kind of get some of the anger under control, and help me kind of process some of the stuff that I was going through. And I went for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, maybe. Basically every week, going to appointments. And around that time, so I lived in Connecticut at the time. Around that time, my wife and I were going to move out to Arizona, and also the counselor that I had been talking to the whole time was uh, he was moving to another facility as well. And so I was like, what, this maybe is just a sign that maybe I'm good to go, and I can just kind of cut it off here. And so moved out here to Arizona. The first couple months were kind of busy with unpacking, and all this stuff. And I was okay. I felt like I had my anger under control. Things were going in a good direction. Um, but then after a little while, maybe after the first year or two, I started noticing myself getting back into some of those old habits. I was drinking more. I was getting angry and frustrated with things a lot more. And I was like, okay, this is not the type of person I want to be. I'm catching it now early, before I get to the point where I'm yelling at a dog, and doing stuff like that. Um, so I made another appointment with the VA, got in with them, and I've been doing honestly, I've been doing counseling for the last couple of years for different types of treatments, and things like that. But off and on, I'll go try one treatment, take a few months off, go try another treatment, take another few months off, and because sometimes it's draining, mentally it's draining to go through some of these treatments that they put you through. And you kind of need to take a break from them from time to time. But um, you know, it kind of just helps to give me a different perspective, and a way to just kind of talk about some of the issues that I've been dealing with. Um, sometimes some days are easier, some days are harder, but I know that it's working towards this goal of getting back to the type of person I used to be. I'll never be 100% the same person, but it's getting me back to being a happier, friendlier type of person that I want my kids to have as a dad. That type of person is what I'm working towards. I'm not 100% there, but I keep working at it. If I don't keep working at it, then I've basically given up, and I don't want to do that either. You know.
Yeah, I think that's what people don't understand about therapy. Sometimes it's like, first of all, most people are scared to even just get started, which I kind of understand. I kind of don't. But it's also like you're not going to get fixed by one session. You're not going to get fixed by 100 sessions,
Yeah.
and kind of what you're doing, I've actually done myself where it's like in the beginning, you go a lot. And then after a while, it's like, okay, I'm good right now. But when I need it, if I'm going through an episode, I feel like a certain way, maybe it's time to go talk to somebody. And then I might
Yeah.
not need to talk to somebody for like 2 months, right? Because you
Right.
kind of you I think it's really therapy is really about understanding yourself and what your triggers are and what you're actually like the reason that you're thinking the way you do. And then once you can understand that, you can start working through these things yourself. It doesn't mean like you're always going to be good and you're never going to need help again, but like I think the more proactively you can think about certain things, the better off you're going to be, to
Yeah.
where you don't have to be in therapy every day of the week for 3 years.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So this is the Fit Veteran podcast. So I do got to ask you, man, what does your workout routine look like? Tell me kind of how that helped with the PTSD, everything you went through with your brother, things like that. And then I know you got like the bum knee. I don't know if you can still run and stuff like that, but like tell us like what you kind of do to get around those injuries.
Yeah, so the knee actually is pretty much good to, as good as it ever was. I had
Nice.
a surgery after I got back home. The issue that I had with the knee was there's something that's in your knee that helps the kneecap form when you're like really young, like a baby.
Mm.
Because when you're born, you actually don't have kneecaps, and so it forms afterwards. So there's a thing that's in there, and I had taken a fall when I was in Afghanistan, and it knocked that thing out of place. And they showed me on the x-rays or the MRI, whatever it was, and it kind of almost looked like a shark's tooth.
Mm.
And so what was happening was that thing was out of place, and it was like jabbing into the muscle tissue in my leg. And so
Mm.
like every step I took was excruciating, because it was basically like getting stabbed every time I took a step. And so they just went in, and since my kneecap's already formed, I don't need that thing anymore. So they just went in, cut it out, and it's been pretty much good ever since then. I've also had back injuries, back and neck injury, that makes it difficult for me to do certain kinds of activity. I used to run, but it got to the point where I can't run anymore. Just the impact of running on the back and neck, it was too much. So I go to the gym and I do some lower impact type activities. For cardio, I'll do like the bike, or the stair climber type thing for that, just to keep me moving, get me sweating, that type of thing. And I'll use the machines for the weights, because again, with a bad back and bad neck, like I don't want to do free weights and end up having another injury that's going to end up hurting myself even more. So I use the machines to keep myself safe, while I'm also exercising the other muscles. There's only so much I can do, but I try to do as much as I can, because again, I don't want to get back to that point where I'm just sitting around not exercising and just feeling like complete crap. I wish I could do more, but just you get older, your body starts telling you can't do that anymore. You're not as good as you used to be.
Yeah, for sure. How often are you going to the gym nowadays?
I try to go every day.
Every day. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if I miss a day, it's because I had something early going on, or sometimes it's going to take up most of my day, and I just couldn't make it. But that's where I kind of figure, like, the off days or days off kind of get built in, because every once in a while there's just one of those days that get built in the schedule. And sometimes uh sometimes my body just tells me, you're not getting out of bed today. You went too hard the other day. Like, you're gonna rest today. And so I try to go every day, but realistically, it's at least 6 days a week I'm going.
That's awesome. Good for you, man. And tell me kind of how that helps the mental side of things, as far as with the PTSD and that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big difference. I notice in myself, uh if I don't go to the gym for like a couple days in a row, like even just like 2 days in a row, by that third day, I'm like, oh my gosh, my depression, and just like thinking back of all the shoulda coulda woulda type things with stuff with my brother, and all these negative thoughts just keep coming in. And so getting to the gym, getting some you know energy out somehow, I don't know how it works, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, I don't know how these things work, but somehow by doing that it helps to kind of keep some of that down. It's not definitely not 100% cure all type thing
Right.
for it, because even days that I do go to the gym, I still have days where you know I'm depressed and upset, and other things like that too. But I can see a night and day difference between days that I go to the gym and days that I don't. And so I try to do as much as I can, because if I start letting that slip, then I'm going to get to the point where starting to see those old habits start creeping back up. I'm going to start drinking more. I'm going to start eating like crap, and having the comfort foods that aren't all that great for me. And I'd much rather be in good shape, so that way I can not I'm not going to win any bodybuilding competitions, but I want to be there like later on in life for my kids too. I want to see them grow up and get married and have kids, and start families of their own, and I want to be there for them, when inevitably life is going to happen to them, and they're going to have questions that a dad's supposed to be there to answer. I want to be there for them, and so I need to take care of myself. And so I find that is like part of my mission is to be there for them. And that's my next mission, is like just being there, being a good dad, providing for them, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm doing the best I can with that. If I make a mistake, well, I'm human too, so they're gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that ties back into kind of like you said, with the when you work out, you're still gonna feel depressed sometimes. You're still gonna feel anxious. You're still gonna have the PTSD syndromes, but they get way alleviated when you're actually on top of your mission, and you're working out. And
Right.
I love what you said about just that's your mission, is like be there for your kids and your family, because they love you and they all need you. And anybody listening to this, like somebody cares for you and they need you around. So
Yeah.
so definitely practice those good habits.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, cool. So last question, or last little segment here. Let's talk about your podcast. So you have the Drive On podcast. I've been listening to it a lot actually in the last week or two. So very interesting guest. First of all, like what prompted you to start that? Obviously you did the book. I don't know if that tied into it. And then also like, what kind of guest do you just love talking to?
Yeah, so the podcast started about a little over 4 years ago now. And when I was overseas in Afghanistan, the company that I served with, we didn't lose a single soldier in our company. And we came back home, we started losing them here to suicide. And obviously one is too many, but that number kept moving up. And I was like, something's got to give here. Like I can't just sit around waiting for another phone call or text message or something saying, "Hey, so and so took their life." I wasn't okay with just sitting around with that. So I was like, how do I help this problem? Because not only was I realizing, hey, I got mental health problems. Obviously, some guys that I served with had mental health problems, but it was becoming around that time, more and more well known that the entire military community is dealing with a lot of different problems, between mental health or physical health or finances or relationships, all these different things, that all of that stuff contributes to this 22 a day that you mentioned earlier. Like all of those things, you get a divorce. Well, that could be a reason that somebody goes and decides to end their life, or you lose your job, or you all these things, right, are just baked in. And so I was like, how do I help these people who need this help, who might be sitting there suffering in silence, not realizing that there are other people maybe who've gone through this and came out okay. Maybe sucks at the time, but they've come out okay on the other end of this. How do I reach these people, as many people as possible? And so I was like, well, a podcast is pretty easy because it's free for the listener. They can listen to every episode. I got over 300 episodes now. They can go back and listen to every single one of them and just binge listen to it if they want. And they'll they'll get all the information that all these great guests have had to offer. Um, and so, when I first started it, the only problem that I had was I had no idea what to do as far as starting a podcast. I didn't know any of the technology, the equipment, or any of that kind of stuff. I had no clue. But I was like, you know what, screw it. This is important enough. I'm going to figure it out. And so the first few episodes, I actually didn't even tell anybody other than my wife that I was doing a podcast, because I was like, this is probably going to suck. And if it does, it's probably going to crash and burn. And I just don't want anyone to know about it. Right.
Right.
But the first few episodes went okay. They've obviously gotten better over time, but I started telling people about it, and it just started kind of gaining momentum, and start bringing guests and talking to people, and sharing uh, inspiring stories of people who have overcome some setback or adversity in their life, and what they did to overcome it, and how they're doing now. And um, you know I tell these stories because there's somebody out there somewhere who went through something similar. I'm not saying they had a same exact carbon copy, exact situation that's exactly the same, but they went through something similar. Maybe it's a breakup, maybe they lost their job, maybe they, suffered the loss of a loved one, or something like that. Um, and they're sitting there and they don't know how to get out of that hole. That's what this show is about, is sharing those stories to say, hey, look, there is hope for you. There's someone out there who's done something similar. They've been able to figure this out. Maybe it's just you need to get that mindset shift. Maybe hear those words that person speaks to tell their story that might help you get out of whatever the funk that is that you're in. And we also talk to people who represent organizations, or maybe the individuals themselves who support veterans in one way or another. It could be nonprofits, or things like that offer therapies or other treatments that maybe aren't available through the VA. And so we talk to all those people too, because let's face it, a lot of times people go to the VA, they talk about how the VA isn't going to help them, or they tried it and it's just not working, and all these things, and then they lose hope. They're like, well, there's no hope for me anymore because I tried everything. Well, if you think you've tried everything, you're wrong. There are so many different things out there that you can try, and I want to expose as many of those as possible. A lot of these nonprofits, they don't have huge budgets to go and do, television commercials or billboards or all this kind of stuff to raise awareness for them. So yeah, I'm going to bring them on the podcast. We're going to talk about whatever it is that they do, type of people that they help. And if it resonates with some of the listeners, great. Go check them out, go use their services, and get the help that you need. And that's really what we're trying to do, is help people, and help them find hope for the people who may feel like all hope is lost.
Sure. That's a that's a super powerful mission, man. And I think if anybody can take that on, it's you, man, and what you've been through. So I appreciate having you on, man. Again, super powerful story. Where can we get a copy of that book from? Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. Again, Surviving Son is the book. You can get a copy there. That's probably the best place to get it. They're pretty quick with shipping that out, so you can get it there. As far as the podcast goes, Drive On Podcast, you can go to driveonpodcast.com, or just search for Drive On Podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Cool. I appreciate you coming on again, Scott, and I'm looking forward to being on yours in a few weeks here. And yeah, man, keep pushing, and hopefully we can do this again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I appreciate it again, Scott. Let me check the Facebook Live here real quick and just see if we got any questions or anything before we pop off. All right, cool. It looks like we had a few viewers. Still got a few viewers, but no questions in the comments. So hashtag live if you guys just live, hashtag replay if you're watching it after the fact. And yeah, we will see you guys on the next one.